I'm a firm believer that in life, sometimes you don't have everything. You cannot have everything figured out by yourself. Sometimes we need people. Sometimes we need help. And sometimes it's a good thing to go ask for help from somebody you trust. But I don't believe you should stay poor forever. You should be needing help all the time. It becomes boring and it becomes difficult to respect. I mean, you've certainly experienced somebody that you had to help for a while, but then later on the help was, we all have people or have experienced somewhere things like that. It's not necessarily nice. I think sometimes you get help from people until you get to fly with your own wings and you do your own things and you make yourself respected. You've experienced going out with somebody and every time you have to pay before, you lose respect for them. And I think you can understand when somebody go through things for a little bit, but then pick themselves up. Now, African president went to France a couple of days ago to meet with the French president Emmanuel Macron to have a discussion. Now, you would ask a discussion about what? They've had a discussion about vaccines.
C'est un mouvement global dont AVMA, cet accélérateur de production de vaccins en Afrique, sera une brique essentielle pour bâtir justement ce véritable marché africain du vaccin.
So the goal of this reunion or this meeting, I don't know what to call it, where African presidents go to present themselves to a younger man. Macron is a younger man compared to this president. To discuss about how to have vaccines for Africans. You know, in Africa, respect is very important. Somebody that's much older than you, you perceive him with a lot of respect. This is throughout Africa. This is this respect, unspoken respect that you have to apply wherever you go. And unfortunately, look at how Macron is touching the Ghanaian president like he's a little boy from high school. Do you think the Ghanaian president would allow a younger president of Africa to do that? No, he wouldn't, because then you're being disrespectful. But because it's Macron, then it's cool. He's white, so it's fine. Now, President Macron joined several African leaders on Thursday to kick off a planned $1 billion project to accelerate the rollout of vaccines in Africa, after the coronavirus pandemic exposed gaping inequalities in access to them. So, African president went to meet Emmanuel Macron to have a discussion on how they should finance Africa to the level of $1 billion, a project to accelerate the rollout of vaccines in Africa. So what does this mean? Africans are unable to create themselves a platform where they can produce enough vaccines for African people. Therefore, they need to go to France to negotiate with a younger president on how they can get financed $1 billion to build facilities in Africa to vaccinate African people for the next pandemic. Yeah, you heard right. There's already a next pandemic that's been planned. I know some people say they're trying to be preventive. You need to be ahead of the curve. Be prepared. Rather be prepared than sorry. I get that. But a pandemic, how often do pandemics happen? The previous pandemic before the 2019 was a pandemic in World War I. That's 1913. That's 100 years ago. More than 100 years ago. You're already planning the next pandemic. Crazy. So the reason why they want to finance this is because they felt like during COVID, Africans had no access to vaccines because powerful and richer countries had purchased all the vaccines on the market. And yet too. And that raises the problem that we have here. Why do Africans always need to beg? Because this is begging. Look at these people. They're old, they're matured, supposedly matured. They're all running behind the younger president, a European president, to find solutions to their issues. Why can't Africans find their own solutions to their own issues? I don't understand that. Are you telling me that Africans are unable to put together for each country to put $10 million available for them to build this facility that will create vaccines for Africa? And I know, for those of you who remember when COVID-19 began, we were very sorry because it was a very sad moment, because then I realized that all Africans were waiting for a solution to come from Europe or America. And that was very sad to see, because you are helpless. Why? Because Africans have not invested into healthcare to that level. Africans have not invested into research and science. African countries have not put money into preventive measures in case situation like this occurred. We were there sitting. I remember I was in Uganda. I was stuck for 8 months. I couldn't travel because of the lockdown. I sat there and luckily I just happened to meet some very good Ugandan people. They made me feel at home. I had a good time. I enjoyed myself. We actually broke the rules so many times. Broke the lockdown. We went to clubbing. I don't really club, but I went clubbing because it was going to be depressive if we didn't do that. Anyway, the question is here. African presidents have to go to France to discuss with a younger president. And the guy speaks to them and talks to them in a way that you can see. I'm not inventing anything. Just look at the way he's hugging them. It's like, hey, my buddy, how are you? I'm not. An African man will never do that to an older person. And I know you would say he is French. It's not part of his culture. But still, he conducts himself. When he goes to Saudi Arabia, he conducts himself in a way that Arabians do. When he goes to China or Japan, he will bow like most Chinese and Japanese do. So he goes there and respects the culture. This is very sad because this is the begging mentality. Let me just remind you here that the African Union building was built by Chinese, not Africans. The African Union building, where African presidents meet together to discuss issues about Africa, was built and financed by the Chinese, not Africans. And then later on, they discovered that the building was planted with listening devices and stuff like that. And every Saturday, data from this building, conversation, discussions, files were sent to a server in China. And you're surprised because they financed you. They say, well, this is a gift to you. There's nothing for nothing, fellas. Nothing for nothing. The 48 laws of power say there's nothing for nothing. You must despise free lunch. And $1 billion they're trying to put together for Africans for vaccine. It's what kind of vaccine they're trying to give you? What kind of vaccine they're trying to give you? Why do you think somebody cares for you so much you'll put together $1 billion for you? Why? Because you have an eye? Why? I mean, people need to wake up. It cannot be for free. And again, let's look into Africa. The WHO advocacy group, the European Union and others want to help Africa get better prepared for the next pandemic. For the next pandemic, fellas. Next pandemic is coming. Which many health experts say it's inevitable. Wow. How do they know that? Are they God? Or maybe something is boiling somewhere already. We don't know that. When the coronavirus pandemic began, Africa produces only 2% of the vaccine it uses. Only 2% of the vaccine used in Africa is produced in Africa. And the goal that we set is that by 2040, the production is increased to reach 60%, Macron said at the launch event. France and Europe have supported this ambition since 2021 with $1.3 billion allocated, and we need to accelerate it. So where's the money? We haven't seen the money. 1.3 billion is already allocated to this project. We haven't seen anything. One of the biggest problem is African leaders go to international platform, ask for money. Once they get the money for supposedly good project, they will come back to Africa and they will eat the money. By eating the money, I mean they will spend the money for themselves. They will build big houses for themselves, buy villas, nice cars, marry 6-7 wives, and we don't see the money in practical. Now, even if there was a decent follow-up with regard to this issue, in Africa, companies that produce vaccines do not belong to Africans. These are international companies logged in Africa, but they are not Africans. I could have given you some names here, but for legal reason, I'm not going to do that. Let's take an example of South Africa. South Africa is a company that produces vaccine. The South African government is a shareholder as well as certain companies, but the South African government share is the smallest, meaning the company still belongs to somebody else. Now, the question is this. If the company belongs to somebody else, are the vaccines being produced by Africans for Africans? How do we know these vaccines are clean? There's nothing wrong with them. And yeah, don't tell me about that thing you want to tell me. Anybody with functional cell brains should ask questions about anything that's been given to him. You need to understand, why is this being given to me? Why is this for free? You need to understand. If you don't understand, then why are you taking it? Maybe you shouldn't be taking it. And I'm going to finish by saying this. Some people in the world are very much not liked by some people in the world. But those people that are not very liked by powerful people in the world are still alive. And you probably know what I'm talking about. And why is he still alive by now? Because he uses functional brain cells to avoid traps. Now, Africans do not avoid traps because they go like, you crazy, you have crazy ideas. Now, you need to ask yourself questions. Why is these people so adamant? Why are there so much involvement for them to put together $1 billion for you to get vaccinated? You need to understand. In the meantime, the $1 billion is going to help facilities in Africa to produce vaccine for Africans. Meanwhile, those facilities do not belong to Africans. What is happening? And they're telling you there's a pandemic happening. It's not about if, it's about when, because it's going to happen. How do they know that? God bless.